Most people think working for the state's tax department must be soul-crushing. I get it. Endless spreadsheets, quiet hallways, and a coffee machine that spits out burnt bitterness instead of caffeine. But for me, it was more than a job. It was control, precision, a place where things either added up or they didn't, and when they didn't, I was the one who noticed. My name is Erica Tran. I was a compliance analyst at the California Department of Revenue. I handled high-income tax cases, people with incomes so big they thought rules didn't apply to them. My job was to make sure they did. I wasn't the loudest voice in the room. Never wanted to be. I liked staying under the radar, showing up early, keeping my head down, and letting my work speak. I wasn't interested in office gossip or climbing ladders. I just believed numbers told the truth if you knew where to look. Donna, my supervisor, used to call me the compass. She meant it as a compliment. Said I had this annoying habit of steering people back to what was right. Maybe I did, but I never thought of myself as some hero. Just stubborn about what mattered. Things started to shift the day Edward Barnes took over as our new director. Slick suit, brushed back hair, way too much charm for a man in government. He shook hands like a salesman and smiled like he already owned the place. Then little things began happening. My access to certain files was suddenly restricted. A few high net worth cases I'd been reviewing vanished from the shared drive. I asked it. They shrugged. I asked Donna. She avoided my eyes. And then, quietly, without warning, I got reassigned. No explanation. Just a transfer slip on my desk and a new cubicle in a quieter corner. I didn't raise hell. I didn't march into anyone's office. That's not how I move. Instead, I did what I've always done. I paid attention, and what I saw next changed everything. It started with little things, the kind of details most people overlook. I'd log into the system and find file folders that used to be color-coded suddenly grayed out. The search function returned no result for names I'd reviewed just the week before. At first, I blamed system glitches. Government databases weren't exactly known for stability, but then I tried pulling up the Rawlings file, a hedge fund billionaire with a long history of creative accounting. It was gone. No audit history, no supporting documents, no digital footprint. Like he'd never existed in our system. I flagged it quietly and moved on, but I started keeping a list. Rawlings wasn't the only one. Over the next 2 weeks, 5 other high-profile names vanished, one by one. Then the office dynamics began to shift. Donna, usually transparent, suddenly became vague in her emails. "Not your concern," she wrote when I asked about the Rawlings reassignment. I noticed whispered conversations by the coffee machine stopped when I entered. I was left out of meetings I'd always attended. When I asked why, people shrugged. Probably just a scheduling thing. Sure, a scheduling thing that slowly pushed me to the margins of the department I'd worked in for nearly a decade. Meanwhile, Edward Barnes was everywhere, walking the halls, leaning over cubicles, making casual visits to teams he didn't supervise. I watched him one day from the break room as he laughed a little too hard at a joke someone made. His eyes flicked to me once. The smile vanished. Just for a second. Something was off. I could feel it. I started backing up what little access I had left, screenshots. Metadata. Timestamps. I emailed myself encrypted notes from a personal account I'd set up under a false name. Not because I had proof yet, but because I knew the pattern. You don't just lose files like that. Not accidentally. Not repeatedly. And certainly not the kind tied to people with lawyers on speed dial. They were cleaning something, wiping it clean, like it had never existed, and they were hoping I wouldn't notice. But I had. The official email came on a Thursday at 4:47 p.m. classic timing for quiet moves. Subject line: internal reassignment notification. No meeting, no conversation, just a cold line of text informing me that, effective immediately, I'd be moved to the small business outreach unit. My old role in high-income compliance, eliminated due to restructuring. It was bullshit, plain and simple. That department didn't just get erased. It got gutted, quietly, without a trace. And now I was being parked in a position where no one asked hard questions, where no one cared if a few numbers didn't add up. I stared at the screen for a long time. My coffee had gone cold, untouched. My inbox filled with automated system messages about revoked access case files, audit histories, databases I'd used daily for years. Gone, just like that. I didn't fight it. Didn't march into Barnes's office. He'd probably expect that. Instead, I signed the acknowledgement form. I smiled at Donna when she passed my desk, even though her eyes didn't meet mine, and I packed up my things in silence. But inside, something had shifted. I don't like being treated like I'm invisible. I don't like being told without being told that what I know doesn't matter. And I especially don't like it when people erase things. Because the thing about people who erase files, they always forget something. A trail, a timestamp, a digital fingerprint hiding beneath the surface. They'd pushed me out to stop me from asking questions, but they'd made one mistake. Now I had nothing to lose. The new desk was smaller. No window. The fluorescent light above me buzzed faintly. like a reminder I didn't belong here. Most people in this unit were friendly but distant, probably briefed to keep it that way. I answered polite questions, smiled when I had to, and kept my real thoughts locked away. But I didn't waste time sulking. My old laptop was gone, replaced with a generic one wiped clean. But I still had a few encrypted flash drives tools I used out of habit, and maybe paranoia. Weeks ago, I'd backed up a handful of raw access logs and metadata strings from our main server. They didn't mean much on their own, just digital noise. Really. But when I opened them again, something clicked. A pattern. Several high-value accounts had file IDs reassigned within milliseconds of each other, too perfect, too clean. I started matching timestamps, folder histories, internal transfer signatures. It wasn't just deletion. It was surgical selective erasure masked as a system update. And whoever did it, they knew exactly which files mattered. I didn't have the full picture yet. Not even close. But I had enough to know one thing. Someone was erasing evidence. Not just hiding it, obliterating it. And if they'd gone that far, it meant the thing they were covering up was worth everything. They thought moving me would keep me quiet, but they hadn't buried me. They'd just given me space to dig. The first real break came from something I wasn't supposed to see. One afternoon, while helping a colleague prep a community outreach spreadsheet, I noticed a line of code buried in a formula, an old server path. Misreferenced. Out of habit, I copied it and ran a trace from my old network credentials. To my surprise, the path still resolved. It led to a buried subfolder on a deprecated drive, the kind only senior analysts used, and only for sensitive, internal cross-checks. What I found wasn't a file. It was a log, an automated record of user actions, file accesses, deletions, reclassifications. Most of it looked like background noise, but the name Barnesy appeared again and again, and so did mine. Apparently, while I was still active in the high net worth team, my login had been used remotely to access and verify at least 7 tax files. All of them linked to ultra-wealthy individuals. All of them now gone. Someone had used my identity to wipe the trail. I felt my chest tighten, not from fear, not yet, but from fury. This wasn't just a cover-up. It was a setup. I was being framed as the cleaner, the compliant analyst who signed off on the disappearances. I backed everything up. Twice. Then I did what I always do when things don't add up. I kept pulling, using system restore points. I began reconstructing fragments of deleted cases. I found partial audit notes on a billionaire with foreign shell accounts, another on a political donor with a suspicious offshore foundation. They weren't just erasing files, they were clearing the names of people who had the resources to make problems go away. And they were doing it with state tools. I found a string of internal memos sent from an encrypted internal server to a private email alias messages with vague subjects like green light and final pass OK. I couldn't crack the full content, but one line stuck out. Need all fingerprints cleared before Q3 audit, ET access revoked. They weren't just talking about me, they were coordinating around me. I stared at that message for a long time. This wasn't just Barnes, it was bigger. Someone up the chain, maybe higher than I could see, was enabling this. Funding it, protecting it. Barnes might be the face, but he wasn't the architect. And I wasn't alone in the system anymore. I needed help, but not from anyone inside. Not from Donna. Not from IT. I needed someone outside the game. Someone with reach, leverage, and no reason to stay quiet. I remembered a contact from a conference years ago. Rachel Kim, an assistant counsel for a state Senate oversight committee. She'd once given me her card after a dry compliance panel and said, "If it ever gets too dirty in there, call me." Back then, I thought it was a joke. Now, I wasn't laughing. I drafted a message, kept it vague, coded, attached nothing but a single sentence. If someone's cleaning house, they're using my broom, and I hit send. I didn't hear back from Rachel for 2 days, and in those 2 days, the air around me thickened. At first, it was subtle. My badge failed twice at the main entrance scanner. It blamed a software update. My work phone locked me out of my own calendar. No big deal until I noticed that 2 internal meetings about data governance had been moved, then disappeared completely. People stopped saying good morning. On the 3rd day, I returned from lunch to find a white envelope on my desk. No name, no stamp, just there. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 12 words, printed in block font. "You've already signed enough things. Don't sign your own exit." No logo, no fingerprint, just the unmistakable stink of warning. I didn't flinch, not outwardly. I slid the envelope into a folder and walked to the women's restroom like nothing happened. I locked the farthest stall and sat with my thoughts swirling. Someone knew I was watching. Worse, they knew I'd sent something. I hadn't used work devices. I hadn't told a soul, but somehow they were ahead of me, watching my moves. Maybe they'd been watching longer than I realized. That night, I walked a different route home. Not because I was scared, because I was being hunted and only amateurs make it easy. At home, I checked my personal email. Still no reply from Rachel, but there was something else. A bounce back notification. The original email I'd sent was marked undeliverable, not rejected, not spammed, intercepted. I hadn't seen that in years since a former cybersecurity audit flagged certain state inboxes as filtered through third-party monitors. At the time, we'd laughed it off as an overreaction. I wasn't laughing now. I used a burner device to resend the message through a VPN, routed through 4 countries. This time, I changed the subject line to something boring tax code review request and embedded the message as a hidden comment in an image file. I went to bed late and dreamt of nothing. The next morning, my chair had been replaced. Not the whole workstation, just the chair. The one I'd used every day for 6 years. The one with the squeaky wheel and worn armrest. Now gone. In its place was a new one, pristine and perfectly quiet. It was a message, not a gift. We know where you sit. That same day, Donna finally made eye contact, but it wasn't friendly. It was tired, sad. She passed me in the hallway and whispered, "You should stop." No context, no explanation, just those words, and then she was gone, swallowed by the elevator. I stared at my reflection in the chrome doors, wondering what she saw when she looked at me. A threat, a fool. I wasn't sure anymore. Later that afternoon, a new case appeared in my task list small business review. Routine check. But when I opened the file, it was blank, not empty. Blank. A shell file created to look legitimate, with no content. I dug deeper. It was a tracker. Whoever created it had embedded a trigger script that pinged a hidden IP every time I opened it, meaning someone now knew exactly when I accessed it, how long I stayed on the page, and which device I used. They weren't just warning me, they were testing me. I leaned back in my stolen chair and took a slow breath. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was coordination. Deliberate, organized pressure meant to make me doubt my memory, my access, my instincts. They wanted me to feel isolated, cornered, disposable. But the thing is, I don't scare that easy. They wanted to play games. Fine. I've always been good with numbers. Now I was counting down. A week passed. No word from Rachel. No more envelopes. Just a slow, tightening silence. But I didn't wait. I built every night after work. I mapped what I knew on paper. With ink. It felt safer that way. Names, files, timestamps, connections. Each pin led to another. Each string tied a new knot. What started as a suspicion was becoming a web, and Barnes wasn't at the center. He was just one thread. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about tax files being deleted. It was about selective erasure. Every case tied to political donors, major developers, private equity groups, hedge funds gone, but not completely. Fragments lingered in off-site backups, printouts misfiled in wrong cabinets, hard drives never picked up. I began visiting the physical archives during my lunch breaks. No one noticed. No one cared. That's what made it easy. Bureaucracy hides things in plain sight. In a mislabeled box meant for redacted prior year reconciliations, I found a copy of a 1099 that didn't belong there. A client who had donated 6 figures to a gubernatorial campaign 3 years ago. His audit had been marked closed no findings, but in my digital backup logs, that same file had failed validation twice flagged for undeclared offshore income. Someone had manually changed the result. A forgery. And whoever did it signed off using my ID. That was the moment I stopped thinking like an analyst. I started thinking like a witness. Back at home, I finally got a reply. A different address. No name. No subject line. Just this. "We received your image. Meet me Friday. Bring nothing digital." Attached was a location, an old parking lot behind a shuttered government annex building downtown. 6:00 p.m. Friday came fast. I wore plain clothes. No ID badge. No devices. Just a printed set of non-sensitive logs, with the rest committed to memory. Rachel was already there when I arrived, leaning against a black SUV. Hair tied back? No smile. "You were smart to encrypt it," she said without greeting. "Less smart to send it at all." I didn't flinch. "You intercepted it." She nodded. "Not me. But someone flagged it before it hit my desk. I had to find it in a dead queue. So it's worse than I thought." "It always is." We sat in the car. She let me speak. "I laid it all out, Barnes. The deletions, the misuse of credentials, the pattern of erased donors, the pressure campaign." When I was done, she handed me a small notebook. Inside were names, not of clients but of officials. "They've been watching the state's audit funnel for years," she said. "Barnes is just a button man. The people funding this, they're building a shadow immunity program." "A what?" "They identify people who can't afford bad press high donors, connected families, big developers, and they scrub the risks. They bury evidence inside bureaucratic voids. Your files didn't vanish. They were relocated, buried behind fake audits and reclassified closures. Who else knows?" She looked at me. Now, just us. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just a scandal. It was an infrastructure, a machine, and I was inside it. "We can't take this public yet," Rachel said. "They'll spin it. Paint you as disgruntled, unstable. You've already been framed once. Then what? We collect more. Enough to force a hearing. I paused. They're already watching me. She didn't blink. Then we'll give them something worth watching. I left that meeting with two things: a burner phone and a purpose. From that day on, I lived in shadows. Every login timed, every file captured and stored in air-gapped drives. I went back through my old paper notes, cross-referenced transfer requests, caught inconsistencies no one would have noticed unless they were looking. And I was looking. One afternoon, I caught a break. A message buried in an old internal thread sent from a junior compliance officer who had resigned a year ago under medical leave. The email was short. They made me sign things I didn't understand. I kept copies. But I'm not safe. He'd left a phone number. I dialed it. Voicemail. But someone answered with a text 3 hours later. I still have the binders. That was it. The last missing piece. The people behind this thought they were invincible. But they forgot the thing about people like me. We don't go away. We dig. And now I was close. Very close. I never considered myself a strategist. I was a technician, a pattern finder, someone who saw what others missed because I looked longer. But now, I had to think like the people I'd spent years quietly outsmarting people who built walls out of process and buried crimes in procedure. Barnes and his handlers had the advantage of position. I had the advantage of time. I met with Rachel again, this time in the back of a quiet law library near the campus of a state university. She came with 2 items: a contact in the office of the state auditor who owed her a favor, and a name I hadn't expected to hear: Michael Thorne, a mid-level IT security contractor who used to run internal compliance systems before suddenly being reassigned. And then resigned. He's got a grudge, Rachel said, and a copy of the original deletion schema. I set up a meeting with Thorne using a public Wi-Fi connection 3 cities away. We met in an old diner that reeked of fried onions and anonymity. He was twitchy, chain-smoking, but he brought the goods a thumb drive and a printed diagram. This, he tapped the paper, is the logic tree, how they filtered target files. They didn't delete them all at once. They routed them to sandbox servers, then used a masking protocol to make them appear non-existent. But the routing logs, still there, buried, but alive. He looked at me like he was unsure whether I was a lunatic or a savior. I just nodded. I didn't need him to believe in me. I needed him to give me the truth. With Rachel's legal knowledge, Thorne's technical insight, and my access to the original logs and off-site print records, we started stitching together a blueprint of what had been done and who had benefited. Every name had a paper trail. Every erased file had a mirrored twin. Every masked audit had a discrepancy. We flagged over 30 individuals tied to questionable closed audits and zero-penalty settlements. Most had donated to key election campaigns or sat on advisory boards with regulatory influence. A few were even connected to real estate projects I'd seen in the news projects that mysteriously received zoning exemptions after their backers' tax issues quietly disappeared. We needed to move fast. Rachel advised we build 2 versions of the report, one digital, one analog. The digital version, fully encrypted, was destined for a sealed drop directly to the Oversight Committee, routed through secured legal counsel to avoid premature leaks. The analog version, hundreds of pages, with physical copies of audit trails, handwritten notes, and backup drives, was to be placed into a time-locked submission system, a legal mechanism that ensures release unless manually stopped by court order. That way, even if someone tried to silence us, the evidence would move on its own. I began working longer hours at the office quietly. Carefully, I smiled at Barnes in the hallway. I nodded in meetings. I asked dumb questions to seem harmless. Meanwhile, I was burning everything they'd built from the inside out. One night, while scanning old approvals from Barnes's desk logs, I found a signature that didn't match any known employee. A ghost signer used to rubber stamp final authorizations. Find out who that is, I told Rachel. She ran it through a private identity verification vendor. The result came back flagged. The name belonged to a deceased analyst, dead for 3 years. They were using a dead employee's ID to sign off on final deletions. That wasn't just unethical. It was criminal fraud. This is the smoking gun, Rachel whispered. No, I said. This is the ignition switch. We selected a date. March 15th, the day the State Ethics Committee would convene for its annual review. We'd prepared a dossier labeled confidential, audit irregularities and executive misconduct. Inside, everything. Our final move was to send an anonymous tip to a veteran investigative journalist, one with a track record of taking on institutional corruption and surviving it. We didn't include names. Not yet. Just enough breadcrumbs. Just enough to guarantee that when the bomb went off, the media would already be looking in the right direction. On the night before the hearing, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping cold tea, surrounded by stacks of paper and drives. I reviewed each page like I was reading the story of someone else's life. But it wasn't someone else. It was mine. They thought they could bury me in silence. But I'd spent my life learning how to read between the lines. Now, I was writing my own. March 15th dawned cold and gray perfect weather for a reckoning. I walked into the department like it was any other day. Swiped my badge, smiled at security, waved at Donna, pretended not to notice that my access logs were still being monitored. They thought I was subdued, contained. They had no idea I was carrying a fuse in my bag. The hearing was scheduled for 11:00 a.m. behind closed doors in a mid-sized conference room at the state capitol building. I wasn't invited. I wasn't even supposed to know it was happening. But Rachel had secured entry through her committee contact, and she'd hand-delivered our analog dossier the day before. The digital package had been triggered at exactly 10:45 a.m. Sent to every oversight body with legal authority over internal auditing, plus one extra recipient, the press, not the general press. One person, Laura Green, a tenacious investigative reporter who'd exposed a federal embezzlement ring 5 years ago and lived to tell the tale. We'd sent her a redacted version, stripped of names but rich with structure, just enough to draw blood. At 11:13 a.m., my phone buzzed in my desk drawer. Then again, it was starting. Barnes passed my cubicle at 11:20. He looked rushed, less polished than usual. His shirt collar was misbuttoned, his phone was pressed tight to his ear, and his voice, usually so smooth, was clipped and urgent. I opened the secure chat Rachel had set up. One message. They're rattled. Someone spilled coffee during the first 10 minutes. By noon, the fallout had begun. The ethics committee paused the hearing mid-session and went into executive discussion. Barnes was pulled out of his office by 2 men in suits quietly, but not subtly. Donna got a call and left in tears. One of the project leads from IT was escorted out of the building entirely. The press embargo didn't hold. At 12:37 p.m., Laura Green tweeted a single line that lit up my screen. Breaking. Audit irregularities tied to political donors, source says systemic cover-up. And just like that, the silence broke. By 1:00 p.m., I was called into a private meeting with HR and legal. They didn't accuse me. They didn't threaten me. They asked questions carefully, nervously. I gave them nothing, just bland professionalism and non-committal answers. They were fishing, but I had already moved the pond. That evening, the department issued a vague press release about cooperating with an internal review. It was damage control. Too little, too late. I met Rachel that night in the same parking lot where this all began. She was already on the phone, voice tight, snapping instructions to someone. When she hung up, she smiled. They opened an independent investigation, she said, and the governor's office wants a briefing. You think they'll bury it? They can't. Too many eyes now. We both knew the machine wouldn't fall overnight. Bureaucracies don't shatter, they erode. Slowly, reluctantly. But this was the beginning. Barnes didn't show up for work the next day. Rumor said he was taking a leave of absence. Whispers about federal inquiries floated through the break rooms. Half the executive team stopped coming in. IT servers were locked down for audits, and internal memos about whistleblower protections started appearing, something we'd never seen before. I wasn't stupid. I knew what came next. There'd be blowback, retaliation, but I was prepared. Rachel's team had documented everything. The time-locked drop would release the full report to public record unless manually stopped, and only Rachel held the override key. I walked past Barnes's office one last time. The door was ajar, the lights off, empty, except for a half-drunk cup of coffee on the desk and a stack of papers still warm from the printer. They'd underestimated me because I didn't yell, I didn't rage, I didn't threaten or demand or storm out. I documented, I waited, I exposed, and now the system had no choice but to look at itself in the mirror. The official report dropped 5 days later. It came from the state auditor's office, stamped and sealed, and leaked within minutes. 73 pages outlining systemic mismanagement, irregular audit closures, and unauthorized data deletions within the Department of Revenue. The language was careful, almost surgical inconsistencies, discrepancies, possible violations. But to those who knew how to read between the lines, it was damning. Barnes's name appeared 6 times, each reference more explicit than the last. The last page confirmed it. A formal recommendation for criminal investigation into Edward Barnes and related actors for misuse of public systems and obstruction of internal controls. That morning, the office was silent. Not the usual bureaucratic hush, but something heavier. Like a funeral in slow motion, Barnes didn't return. Instead, 2 federal agents showed up mid-morning with a sealed subpoena and a request to access his workstation. Donna tried to help, but they waved her off. It wasn't hostile, just official, cold. Calculated. I stood in the hallway, watching as they packed up his laptop, his phone, the binders he always kept locked in his desk. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just stood there, because in that moment, the silence spoke louder than any victory dance ever could. Later that day, HR called a mandatory department-wide meeting. The interim director stepped up, a quiet, no-nonsense woman named Jacobs from the Office of Legal Oversight. She spoke plainly. There will be a full audit. All systems, all departments, and all staff will be interviewed. You are expected to cooperate. No exceptions. She paused, then added, whistleblower protections have been activated. If you have information, now is the time to come forward. A few eyes flicked toward me, but no one said a word. I didn't care. Let them look. That evening, my inbox pinged with a message from Rachel. He's not fighting it. His lawyer's already talking plea deal. It hit me harder than I expected. Not joy, not relief, just a long exhale. The kind you only take when the weight starts to lift. Barnes had been the face of the operation. The smile, the handshake, the middleman, but his fall meant something larger. That the web wasn't untouchable after all. That if you pull the right thread, even a system built to bury you can come undone. I went home, pulled the shades, and sat in the quiet. No burner phones, no backup drives, just me, the stillness, and the echo of everything we'd just unraveled. It wasn't over, but it had begun, and this time, they couldn't erase it. 2 weeks after the report dropped, I received a call I never expected. It came from a blocked number. Early on a Monday morning, I let it go to voicemail. I'd stopped answering anything unlisted, but this one left a message. Ms. Tran, this is Deputy Director Elena Michaels from the Governor's Office. We'd like to speak with you regarding an oversight initiative. Please return the call at your convenience. I stared at my phone for a full minute. Then I called Rachel. They're making a move, she said immediately. The press coverage has cornered them. They need to look proactive. Should I even take the meeting? You should hear what they're offering. Just don't go alone. We met 2 days later in a quiet state office with no logos on the wall. No press badges, no optics. Just a sterile conference room with a pitcher of water and a legal pad in front of each seat. Deputy Director Michaels entered with 2 advisors. She was calm, direct, and utterly unreadable. Ms. Tran, she began, you've demonstrated rare integrity in a moment when most would have stayed silent. You didn't. I didn't say anything. We're proposing the formation of a new internal ethics and audit authority, one with direct reporting to our office. We'd like you to lead it. It took me a moment to register the words. You want me back? I asked. Inside the system that tried to erase me. We want someone who knows how the rot spreads, she said. Someone who's already proven they won't flinch. They offered full autonomy, a team I'd choose, access to every department's internal systems, full audit rights, no political oversight, no buried memos. It was everything people like me had only ever dreamed of on paper. But dreams come with conditions. I'll think about it, I said, rising from my chair. You understand this is a limited window, Michaels added. No, I said. I understand exactly how long windows stay open in government. I left the building with a strange clarity. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. For a week, I didn't respond. I went to work like always. Though my tasks were fewer now, the department was still under internal review, and most of my colleagues were either frozen in place or too nervous to speak above a whisper. They all knew what I'd done, but no one said it, and that was fine. I wasn't looking for gratitude. Still, the offer from the governor's office sat in the back of my mind like an unopened letter. Tempting, sharp, weighted with implications. Lead a new ethics and audit authority. Report only to the top. Build a team. Set the standard. Fix the thing from the inside. It sounded noble. It also sounded impossible. I spent a few nights walking, long loops around quiet streets, past shuttered storefronts and lit windows. I kept thinking about how easy it is to get absorbed by the machine you're trying to fix. How good intentions turn into exceptions, how exceptions turn into compromise, and how compromise becomes silence. They'd given me power at least on paper, but power inside a broken structure still answers to the walls around it, even if those walls are polite now. On Friday, I met Rachel for coffee. We sat by the window and said nothing for a while. They want you to be the face of reform, she finally said. I know. They think giving you authority means you'll stop being dangerous. I know that too. She sipped her coffee. So, I smiled, just a little. I'm not going back, I said, but I'm not walking away either. Her eyebrow lifted. I'm starting something of my own, I said. Private, independent, something with teeth, something that can't be silenced by a memo or a shuffled committee. She nodded. Whistleblowers will come to you. Let them, I said. The system's had its chance. Now it's our turn. That afternoon, I typed my response to the deputy director. Respectful, grateful, firm, and final. Then I closed my laptop, stood up, and stepped into the sun. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for permission. I was writing my own charter. 3 months later, I was sitting in a co-working space downtown, nothing fancy. Just a second-floor corner with decent Wi-Fi and quiet neighbors. A modest brass plaque on the glass door now read, Tran Integrity Network, Independent Oversight, Unfiltered Accountability. It still made me smile. We weren't big, just me, a pro bono paralegal, and a forensic accountant who'd left his cushy job at a hedge fund after seeing one too many cooked books. But we had momentum. People were reaching out quietly, carefully, but steadily. Mid-level analysts, local auditors, even one terrified intern from a private contractor. They didn't want attention. They wanted protection. And that I could give. Rachel stopped by once a week to advise. She never stayed long. She was already working 2 other investigations, one involving federal transportation grants. But every time she left, she'd say the same thing. Don't let them box you in. I didn't plan to. The headlines had moved on. Barnes was still under investigation, but out on bail. 2 other executives had resigned. A third had vanished, retired early, relocated, names scrubbed from all recent directories. Typical. The governor's office rolled out a new ethics initiative with a lot of buzzwords and very few teeth. But I wasn't angry about that anymore, because I'd stopped expecting the system to fix itself. Change doesn't happen when institutions shift. It happens when individuals refuse to sit still. One afternoon, I received a plain envelope, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, Anonymous. Because of what you did. I didn't shred the files. Because of what you did. I spoke up. Because of what you did. I'm still here. I folded the paper carefully and slipped it into my drawer. I didn't need a medal. I didn't need headlines. This was better. Later that evening, I stood by the window, watching the city move slow, chaotic, imperfect, but still moving. Behind me, the soft hum of machines kept working. So did we. I took a breath. Not one of relief, but resolve. They'd tried to erase me. Now I was permanent.